on page 586. So we've gone over the story of the Ten Commandments a few times, but it's very important to understand those and why it's important that we learn those. The Ten Commandments, as they call them, the 10 utterances is what we call it in Judaism, because that's what the Hebrew says, the 10 utterances. It doesn't say 10 commandments, because they're not actually commandments that you would really understand as such. But one of the things I want to get to is that about Yitro. It says Yitro, the priest of Midian. That means he was a pagan priest. Okay? And remember, Moshe had sent his wife and sons back to him because it got too dangerous for them in Egypt before, when he was confronting Pharaoh. And he didn't want Pharaoh to be able to use them as a leverage against him. Okay? So he sent them back. Now it's time for them to be reunited. And here's the thing. I just want people to understand that when Israel crossed the Reed Sea, I know we always call it the Red Sea, but it's actually called the Reed Sea. That's what it says in Hebrew, Reed Sea, not Red Sea. Although the two names are almost alike, okay? But it's actually the Reed Sea. Anyways, Israel came to the west side of what is now known as the Sinai Peninsula. They came to the west side, so they were on that part of the Red Sea, as it's called today, that other arm of the Red Sea to the west, where we have Israel at the top with Eilat, the Israeli city there. But they were in a spot because they followed God had them follow a dry riverbed. And the dry riverbed came out to a large beach area that's still there today. And that's why it describes it having mountains on the north, mountains on the south, and then the Egyptians came and they were on the east, okay? But they were on the west. And so across from that is what we call today the country of Saudi Arabia, okay? And the thing is, a lot of people questioned whether Israel had crossed the Red Sea because they were looking in the wrong spot, and there was no place for 6 million people to be found, that they could camp. That's because it wasn't on the east side, it was on the west side of Mount Sinai. On the west side, we find there's a big beach. And what's interesting about it is right where that beach is a natural structure under the water. It looks like a bridge. It goes down on one side, down on the other, goes up to the other side to Saudi Arabia, okay? And in this, the scientists who've been studying this have found hundreds of chariot wheels and chariots and swords, Egyptian equipment, mostly covered in coral and stuff as that would happen over the couple thousand years, But you can still see the shape of them and stuff, in that spot. And so when God had Israel go through the water, it says that an east wind blew, and it which is a supernatural wind, because our wind usually comes from the west, okay, in the northern hemisphere, okay, and it dried it up, but he also separated the Egyptians from Israel, so that the Egyptians could not move one way, come forward towards Israel, right? He sent the angel behind them to keep them apart. Yet there was light in the Israelite camp, but no light they're still in darkness over here, right? And then Israel in the morning started to head out, right? And this stuff was going on. We know the story of Naaman, would be, I think it's brother-in-law or father-in-law, I can't remember, to Aaron, Moses' brother. Everybody was still standing there, so he went in and started walking through it like we had talked about before last week. And as it got up to his nose, he still kept going, and then the water separated where it needed to be, and it was walled up on either side. Okay, it says it was walled up on either side, and I mean, I like how the Ten Commandments does it, but I really like how the Prince of Egypt does it, because not only it shows the walls, but it also shows the fish and the whales and stuff in there on the walls on both sides, and they're like going, hey, what's going on? I used to go this way and now I can't, you know. You know, who knows? But you can see them, and that's to me, that's just totally amazing. I would love to have been able to see that. And then they went on, not only that, but they went through it on dry ground. And here's the other miracle. When the Egyptians went to follow them, what happened to the dry ground? It became mud. They got stuck in the mud, and it became rocky, and they broke their chariot wheels, and many of them realized that God was fighting for them again, and they tried to get out of there. Even Pharaoh, that's the thing, Pharaoh went down, led his men. I know in the Ten Commandments, it shows Pharaoh standing up on the top of the ridge while his men are going down there, but in reality, that's not how the Pharaoh would lead. The Pharaoh would... Yeah, and then the Prince of Egypt, he got washed up on a rock, so they did show him go in there, but he got washed up on a rock.
Pharaoh had died. Pharaoh owned the Israel.
Yeah.
And all of the slaves who left.
Yeah.
If he hadn't died, they would still belong to him.
Yeah.
As it was, he died.
Yeah.
There was no longer an owner. They were free.
Yeah.
But there's something in, this is funny because there's something that I've been tracking with you, I have to look it up again, but he did manage to get to land, but it was too late. And in his dying breath, he realizes and repents, and that's why it says that.
Yeah.
What is it? Egypt will be his people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Later on.
And it's very possible because, you know, that God that allowed him to repent at that time and stuff. But we do know, like Cheryl was saying, is that's why the only son of Pharaoh, the firstborn, died during that last plague. And then Pharaoh died there because it left no heir, no ownership of Israel over them except for God. God redeemed Israel by the death of the firstborn son of Pharaoh and of the death of Pharaoh. And so Israel was then free. It's like an immersion. They went through the sea, the water. They were slaves to Egypt here, but on this side they were a free nation, free people, born again. Okay? And that's what we have as a picture for us to see. And then Yitro comes, and that's the interesting thing too, is because the land of Midian is in Saudi Arabia, not in Sinai, like some people, scientists like to try and say, because they put question marks there, but Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia. They have found it. Scientists found it quite a while ago, and Saudi Arabia has it fenced off and is no trespass zone. You can be shot on sight now. King Solomon had put up pillars on either side of where the crossing took place, which were both found, the one on the Egyptian side, which is on Mount Sinai Peninsula, on the west side, and on the east side of Saudi Arabia, they found the other one. These scientists did, so they knew that they were in the right spot, which Solomon memorialized the crossing of the Red Sea at those 2 points. Okay. The one on the Egyptian side, because of the wind and stuff, the words and stuff have been, it's been worn down. But the one on the Saudi Arabian side still you could still read it very clearly, what it said. Once Saudi Arabia realized that these guys had found Mount Sinai and they had found the crossing, they sent in people to cut down the pillars on the Saudi Arabian side, and they put a huge fence around the mountain and forbid anybody from going there. They gave it a different name too, but you can see it on Google Maps. Google Maps shows it, okay? And it shows the journey that they went from the sea to the mountain, and there's a big enough area right there in front of the mountain to house all these people all the way around it and stuff, okay? There was also another scientist, I can't remember his name offhand, who was on the Discovery Channel, I think, and he was Jewish. He's Jewish, and he also described the same place. He did get permission to go there. Probably one of the few people to get permission to go there and see this stuff, and they found ancient Jewish artifacts and stuff in that same spot. And then even in the book of Acts, it says that Paul went to Mount Sinai, which is in Arabia. Arabia is not in Sinai Peninsula, it's in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. Okay? That area there. So we do know where it's at. Okay? And Yitro comes from the land of Midian, which is on the west or the east side of on the west side of that part of the Red Sea on the east coast of Saudi Arabia. It's in that area, okay? And so he hears that Moses and his people are there. He comes and he brings his wife and his children back to him because now he's safe. They'll be safe and stuff like that. And he even lets them know, "I, your father-in-law, I'm coming to you with your wife and your 2 sons." And he sees them, he gives them honor and stuff like that, and they talk, and we don't know all the story of what's going on here. But the thing is a transformation with Yitro. Okay? Yitro is of the nations. Yitro, and he has a couple different names in here, but he's the same person, the father-in-law of Moses. And he has a conversion that takes place. He hears all these stories, but he's already heard the stories, but now he's hearing them from Moses and all the things God has done for them. After they left there too, the water and the food and the manna and stuff like that. So he's able to see this stuff as well, and he realizes that now I know that Adonai is greater than all other gods because he rescued those who were treated arrogantly. That's in verse 11 of chapter 18. Now I know, right? Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God, not her own, came with all the leaders of Israel to share the meal before God with Moshe's father-in-law. So now, instead of making an offering and sacrifice, whatever, to his gods, he makes an offering and sacrifice to God. Doesn't necessarily mean he's a priest of God at this time, but he was the priest of Midian. He has made a conversion, he has repented, and he has turned to God. And this picture shows that he makes an offering to God to show his conversion. But not only that, but he also is a very wise man. God has blessed him with wisdom in that he sees Moshe struggling with the people, because this is what a king is supposed to do, is to judge, help judge and bring peace and stuff like that, settle disputes and stuff. Not necessarily to rule over with an iron fist the people. That's man's idea, not God's idea, right? And he sees him doing this all by himself, and so he says, "Hey, what you're doing isn't good. You're going to wear yourself out, and you're going to wear the people out. So can I give you this wisdom I have about this? And if you agree to it and God agrees to it, then I think it will preserve your life and these people's lives to get you to where you're going peacefully." And so he tells them, and this is the beginning of the Sanhedrin. Now, as we know, a lot of these parts are kind of out of order, because we learn later, we read later where Moses is kind of fed up with the people, and he asks God for help, and so God says, "Call 70 of your people," and stuff like that, and I will give part of the spirit you have and put that on them. Okay, that story goes with this. Okay, and that's what happens. So they were leaders of thousands, of hundreds of. Okay, and that's how we have it set up, even in the Jewish judgeship or the judiciary, in that same way. And then how our country is built on the same type of thing. Our Constitution is based on this. Okay. Because it's too much for one person, and for one person to have too much power, human beings will get too much power and they abuse it and stuff, right? Yeah, like what we see going on with the judges right now, who are trying to stop Trump from doing what is right, what needs to be done. Finally, somebody doing what they need to do. And I support Trump and stuff. I'm sorry, but I don't necessarily agree with everything he does. He's also a human being, so I don't worship him. I know there are some people who do, and you got to be careful of that. What we do need to do is pray for all our leaders, not just the good ones. but we should especially be praying for the ones who aren't good, that they would be good, they would become good, that they would get saved. Okay? But as we see, Moses does do that. And so, as we remember in the other story, Moses called these 70 people, 70 men out, and 2 stayed in the camp, remember? But so 68 came out, and they received the Holy Spirit. They received a part of the Spirit onto them. And they began to prophesy after that. God blessed them, gave them knowledge and stuff like that, and they began to prophesy, began to talk and speak prophecies and stuff. And the other 2 in the camp, somebody comes around and says, hey, these guys are prophesying in the camp, and you need to stop. That's Joshua, right? He's very gung-ho, very zealous for Moses, and nobody should be able to take anything from him. But Moses is like, it's okay. I wish that all the people of Israel would prophesy, you know? And that's where the starting of the Sanhedrin came from. Now, Sanhedrin is actually a Greek name that was given to them, but they were the elders, the ones that they would come to, the 70 judges, shoftim. Each one was a shofat, a priest, or a judge. And they would judge, but not only that, but they were teachers. It was part of their job to teach the people in their judging, okay? And even today, in order to be a judge of the Torah, you have to know the Torah inside and out. You can't just go in there and be a judge, right? Even in our country, you can't just go in and be a judge if you don't know anything about the law, right? Although there are some people who have bought into that. We do know that. That does happen. That's why that's called corruption, right? But you have to know, you have to be high in understanding of the Torah and the teachings and stuff that go with it. You can't just be a mediator, a medium type of knowledge or anything. You got to be it's got to be way up there in their understanding and everything in order to be a judge. And even today, the Sanhedrin has come back in Israel. It is still there, has come back now, resurrected, you might say. They do have the leaders of the Sanhedrin. One of my favorite teachers that I like to read and stuff passed away here not that long ago. He was the head of the Sanhedrin, first head of the Sanhedrin for a long time. And he passed away a couple years ago, but he writes these excellent books on the Talmud and on the Zohar and stuff like that. Anyways, so we see that God has sent Yitro. Yitro has converted, okay? He has converted right here. And not only that, but we read later that the Midianites, of the family of Yitro, joined Israel. And they became part of Israel as well. And we see again in the book of Judges, when we read the story of Deborah, the prophetess, the judge, that they are in that land and they are still friends with Israel and stuff. But they're still who they are. They didn't convert necessarily to Judaism, but they stayed who they were. But they believe in the one true God, and they're not pagans, okay? And they're not. And we have the mixed crowd that went with Israel out of Egypt, who were not descendants of Abraham, but Gentiles from the nations. But they put their belief in God and in Moses, and which is what God says. These guys are going to, they're going to see. I'm going to talk to them, and they will believe in you forever. God says to Moses, they will believe in you forever, right? And so that's what we see. And so God tells them when they're there. Moses starts the Sanhedrin. They get to the mountain. God calls them up there, and he says, I want you to set boundaries around the mountain so nobody, not even animals, can approach it. He says, now when the shofar blows, they can approach it. But then he changes his mind because people didn't do what they were supposed to do. That's the whole issue right here. That's why God had to tell Moses, no, don't let them. And of course, human beings, we see something supernatural like that and stuff, amazing, and what do people do? They surround it and they try and get as close as they can, right? And so even though God had told them and instructed them that, God told him on the sixth day, take twice as much of the manna, because on the seventh day there isn't going to be any. What happened on the seventh day? You still had people going out and trying to find the manna, right? And so people are, yeah. Huh?
One day fast.
Yeah, for them.
Well, there's a wise Jewish songwriter from the 60s once said, all wise and just, still a man hears what he wants to hear and he disregards the rest.
Yep. A man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. We still have that today. And we see that going on here too, you know. It's just like working with some of my individuals and stuff. We have it so that, you don't say to one of them, hey, you finished this or whatever, and we'll go for a ride. Or maybe we'll go for a ride but all they hear is go for a ride. They're done with the food, they're done with whatever they're going to do. Let's go. And regularly say we're going to go for a ride, let's go. That's all they heard was the ride, And that's the way we are too. We hear what we want to hear. And so that's what was going on there with Israel and stuff. So that's why Moses had to come back down and tell them, keep them away. Even the priests. Well, who are the Kohanim? We see this, in essence, is kind of out of step because we learn about who the Kohanim are. Later, they're called, the tribe of Levi is called, and the descendants of Aaron and his descendants would become the priests, and those of the tribe of Levi would become the Levites, but still part of, in essence, the priesthood, but not priests, right? But part of that to help in the tabernacle and the temple later. So we see that. And then when Mount Sinai comes, or when God comes on Mount Sinai, it says here that on the morning of the third day. What else happened on the third day sometime later, according to the scripture? Well, Yeshua rose, right? So on the morning of the third day, there was thunder, coal, lightning, barach, and a thick cloud on the mountain. Then a shofar blast sounded so loudly that all the people in the camp trembled. Matter of fact, in some of the Jewish traditions, Jewish stories and stuff, it talks about in the Talmud that, or I think it's in the Talmud. Anyways, it says that when the shofar sounded, that the spirits of the people left their bodies, and that God had to raise them up, put their spirits back in their bodies. So, but they trembled, right? And Moshe brought the people out of the camp to meet God. Anyways, so there was thunder, which is the Hebrew word kol, which means voices, and that the people heard voices that sounded like thunder, but they were voices. Okay, they were voices, and the lightning, barak, is a shining, a deep shining, even where they as being like shining armor, like gold-plated gold armor that's just shining and brilliant in the sunlight, and a thick cloud. Oh, a thick cloud. When we in prophecy and stuff, when we read stuff like this, it's actually talking about kalal of people, a assembly of people, or a large group. And so in this sense, we see that the angels of heaven have joined, have come. And what we see here too is that God is giving a ketubah, a marriage contract, which we're going to read. Yeah, Gesundheit, huh? And so God reads part of the ketubah to them and other stuff as well, but which we'll go through. But they're there for a wedding. God is marrying Israel at this time. He's given Israel a ketubah, a promise of. Okay. And what's interesting is that according to Jewish tradition, God raised Mount Sinai up. That's one of the reasons in a Jewish wedding you have a canopy, all right? And bride and groom are under the canopy because it's the sign of a new household being created. okay? And that Israel was a new nation being created, okay? Being created, a new household, a new people. And so God gives the 10 utterances. I don't like calling them commandments because it doesn't say that in the Hebrew. It calls it utterances, 10 utterances in Hebrew. And he gives these things here, but each one is kind of a category to itself of all the 613 commandments. Okay? So these are just our basic understanding. If you can just get done with the basics here, this is not just for how we are to understand God and how we are to treat God, but also to treat each other, you know? And it's very important that we understand those things. They're not standalone, okay? I know a lot of people think that they're standalone, or what they call the moral laws, that we're only supposed to keep the moral laws. Well, that's wrong. All the Torah we're to keep that are for us, right? These are just part of it.
Well, and think about it this way. We get an illusion of this as Jewish people from, what is it, Deuteronomy 6:4. What does it say to us to do when we recite Shema? The first line, what do? We cover our eyes. Because utterances are different than commandments. You do commandments.
Yeah, you
hear
do
utterances.
commandments, you hear utterances. Yes. Yep. And so each one, you know, we always read it down, right? We always read it down here, right? We always read it going down and then across, right? Over here. But in reality, it goes here, and this one corresponds with this one. You read this, and this one corresponds with this one, and so forth and so on. They go together. Not just do we read them down, but they go across. The first one is a recognition, just like the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. We're making a declaration that God is saying, I am Adonai, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the abode of slavery. Okay? And that goes with number 6 here. I'm sorry. Yeah, do not murder. Why? Because we are created in God's image. To murder a human being is to desecrate God's image in essence, okay? So that's what we got to look at here, okay? And so that's why it says do not murder. It doesn't say do not kill. It says do not murder. Even the Hebrew has 2 different words for that. One for murder, one for kill. And the Hebrew word here is do not murder, okay? There is a place for killing in defense of yourself, in military, and so forth, and for putting someone to death who has violated commandment that ushers in the death penalty, so forth and so on, okay? And then we have, you are to have no other gods before me, and you're not to make for yourself any carved image or of any kind of likeness or representation of anything in heaven above, on the earth, and on the seas under the seas, right? And that conforms to, or commit adultery, okay? So number 2 is don't commit idolatry, right? The worship of false gods and images and stuff like that goes with do not commit adultery. God is the creator of marriage, relationship, a husband and a wife, a man and a woman, okay? And we are not to violate that. God never gave a command to have more than one spouse, right? Right? Even though God would allow it for a while, he knew that people would realize that that's a big mistake because it doesn't bring peace in the house. It brings rivalry, and we see that with Leah and Rachel. There was a rivalry. Huh?
I said it brings you many women.
Yeah. So when adultery is committed, it's just like committing idolatry. God has given us one spouse, and we are to honor them, husband or wife. Doesn't matter. We learn to honor each other, respect each other, support each other, right? That's what we're supposed to do. And then when we go to the third one, you're not to use lightly the name of Adonai. Really what that's saying is you're not to take the Lord your God's name in vain. Well, what that is actually saying is God is saying don't ruin my reputation. God's reputation is very important. God tells us that our reputation should be very important. We should have a good reputation. Don't ruin my reputation by using my name in these stupid things. Saying you're going to do something in the name of God, I'm going to do this in the name, all these things. And when you say the swear words and stuff too, yeah, you shouldn't be saying those anyways, right? But it's really having to do with his with his righteousness, his reputation, right? His reputation is righteousness, right? And we know this because King David, when he committed adultery with Bathsheba, he should have died for the adultery. He should have died, period. And not only that, but he should have died for murder because he had her husband murdered because he couldn't get him. Anyways, you know the story, right? But what is it that God said that he was being punished for? It says he was being punished because he had caused God's enemies to curse his name. You soiled my reputation. And so he didn't die for it, but his child through Bathsheba would die in his place, which is also an interesting thing too, because who was his second son through Bathsheba? Solomon, whose name comes from shalom, meaning peace, right? Peaceful ruler. And in his time, there was no war in Israel. No more. It was peaceful, right? Prince of Peace, King of Peace. Okay, those are pictures of the Messiah, right? And then we have number 4, remember the day of Shabbat, to set it apart for God. You have 6 days to labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Shabbat, our day of rest for Adonai your God. On it, you are not to do any kind of work. And the work that we find out about, God does tell us certain things, not to start a fire on the Sabbath. We can, if it's going, we can go ahead and do that. Not, we don't collect firewood on the Sabbath either, which we do see again here. In here, when the building of the tabernacle takes place, God forbids the people to do any work on the tabernacle on the Sabbath, which would include anything, creating anything, destroying anything, etc. Okay? So those are the work that he's talking about. Okay? And then also, he wants us to rest because, what's interesting is the Romans considered the Jewish people to be very lazy. Why? Because out of 1 day out of 7, they rested. Well, in Roman and most pagan and stuff cultures, Gentile cultures, they worked 7 days a week. They didn't have a day off or whatever. And so the Romans considered the Jewish people to be lazy because 1 out of 7 days they took off. Yeah. I know. And so this number 4 then goes with do not give false evidence. Oh, did I miss one? I think I did. Oh, yeah, here you are. About using God's name in vain and stuff. That corresponds to number 8 here. Do not steal. Okay? When we ruin God's reputation, we steal his reputation. We are taking his reputation away from him. That when we violate that aspect, we in essence have stolen his reputation. And we've sullied it, muddied it, and stuff like that, right? And then we go on to remember Shabbat, and that's number 9, do not give a against your neighbor. Meaning that when we know what the Sabbath is and we violate it on purpose, now there are certain things we can do. Saving a life takes priority over all of it. We do need to feed our animals when we have a farm and stuff. If you have dairy cattle and so forth, you need to milk them because that is causing them pain. That's torture for them, right? So we do those things that are necessary. But the things that aren't necessary, we do not do. And so we don't want to, go out there and we're going to go to McDonald's on the Sabbath and eat lunch and stuff there because a lot of people do that after church on Sundays, right? Yeah, might as well have cheeseburger because what you're doing is you're misrepresenting God and his Sabbath, so you're giving people false evidence. Oh, they keep the Sabbath, but look, they're eating, so I can do that too, right? It's not a good witness for us. We have to be careful when we know what's right, right? And then the last one that we have is honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land which Adonai your God is giving you, right? Number 5. And the goes with the 10th one, do not covet your neighbor's house, do not covet your neighbor's wife, his male or female slave, his ox, his donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor, okay? What this is that God gives us what we need. Our parents give us the things that we need. They raise us in the way to go, to love God and to walk in his ways. And then we are to teach our children the same thing. We pass this on, right? So don't, you see, you know, we may not have everything that the world has, right? But we shouldn't be desiring the things of the world. And that's one of the things it's talking about here. And so, you know, who cares if somebody's rich? Who cares if somebody is a billionaire? You know, that's not us. That's not our care. That's none of our business. That's God's business. God is going to allow these things to happen. And remember what we just read in the Besorah, that it's hard for a rich person to get into the kingdom. Why? Because they have everything they need already. What do they need? God, right? They think of themselves as having that, okay? It's very few rich people that understand that they need God, that everything they have is because of God. And that's how we should be understanding it too. It's not us who have brought us food or money or a house over our heads and this car. God has blessed us with it. It comes from God, and we need to understand that. Everything we have comes from God, and we need to give him thanks for it. We shouldn't be coveting. We should, because what happens when we covet? And this is the thing that's funny. That's like the last one. Do not covet, right? So when you do covet, what happens? You can end up dishonoring your parents. You can end up taking God's name in vain, violating the Sabbath. And what happens when you covet something even more where you want it? You can end up murdering, committing adultery because you want her or whatever, or him or whatever it might be. And then you give false evidence. Why? To try and get them out of your way so you can get what you want, right? I mean, that's generally what was happening in that sense. All because we coveted. All because we desired it. And so we have to be careful with that, because then it becomes, what does it become? It becomes an idol. And not only that, but it causes us to fall. You know, what is it that the adversary did that was he had two things of sin. What was it? Pride, and he coveted God's position. And what did he do? He's the adversary. He's the enemy, right? Because he wanted God's place. He was proud of himself. You know, why can't I be God? You know, what about me? You know, I'm just as good as God and stuff, right? And stuff. And then he said, I'm going to take God's place. He was able to take 1/3 of the angels and deceive them and cause them to follow him. And so we have what we have today, right? The adversary's out there. He does tempting. He does attempt. You know, the thing is, he's not God, just so people know. To be honest with you, he's just another servant of God. He really can't do anything unless he gets God's okay. And that's why we even read that in the book of Job.
He's not a moral actor.
Yeah, he's not a moral actor. And he can't do anything without God's permission. Okay? I mean, his job, God has allowed him to tempt us and stuff like that, but he can't do anything without God allowing him to do it. Okay? In our case, we are moral actors, and we can make decisions. And we can decide not to follow God or to disobey God, right? And it's not God that sends us to the hot place, the lake of fire and stuff like that, hellfire, whatever you want to call it, Gehenna. We send ourselves because we reject God. We reject God and his ways. The adversary gets people out there to convince us of a falsehood. But that's why it's so important for parents, grandparents, and parents to be there for the children, to raise them in the way they need to go, to show them these things. And don't allow them to be a part of places that teach otherwise. I mean, Now, I know we have to send kids to public school, even private schools. Doesn't matter. There's bad in each one. But we, as parents, need to see what's going on, hear what's going on, and then correct it. That's our job as parents. And we will be held accountable before God for not correcting them. I mean, once they become the age of accountability, although our kids are still under us till the age of 18, we can still guide them and keep them from doing those things. But if we don't, and we just let kids be kids, that's a lazy idea. Well, kids are going to be kids. Yeah, that's lazy on your part, I'm sorry to say. If you're not willing to discipline your child, discipline, not punish, discipline means to teach, then you are lazy and hate your children. Right?
Well, what's going to happen to that kid when they grow up and they have no idea of discipline?
And that's the thing we see. Why is it that we see children killing people? You know, gangs and stuff like that. It's because the parents have failed them, and most likely their parents failed them, and so forth and so on. And that's why we need to get away from that. We need to break that cycle. And breaking that cycle is the sins of the father. Yep. It follows. Yep. So what we need to do is break the cycle by teaching our children the right way to live, the way to walk, that God is real, that everything we have is from God. And give thanks to him. Why did Israel go into Babylon? It says, because they forgot who blessed them.
And before that, Assyria.
Yeah, the northern tribes left because of their idolatry and stuff, and a complete abandonment.
And then
But
Ephraim then later got a little bit cocky and went to Assyria. Assyria came in. They attacked the southern kingdom, and then Judah was let out to Assyria. Then Babylon came in.
Judah went to Babylon. The northern tribes went to Assyria. Yeah.
Oh yes, that's right. The other way around.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
It just, and then of course Babylon came in and it conquered Assyria, and then.
Yeah. And so what it is that, and it even says, why, it's kind of a joke, and we see that in the movie Fiddler on the Roof too. Is the guy asks there's a new sewing machine, and the one guy asks him, "Is there a blessing for the sewing machine?" And the rabbi says, "It's a blessing for everything." Why? Because so we don't forget who has given these things to us. There's a blessing, blessing for the season. There's a blessing when we see flowers. There's a blessing when we see a beautiful sunrise or sunset. All these different things. There's a blessing. Why? Because God has given it to us and is recognizing in our lives that this is what God has done for us.
Every time you make a twist or you tie a knot, there's a blessing.
Yep, there's a blessing. So that we don't forget, because we've been to Babylon, we've been to hell and back. Okay? We don't want to go there again. And so we need to understand this, that there's a blessing for everything and every good thing. Not just every good thing, but there's a blessing that comes when we have overcome something too. That we should be blessing God for helping us to overcome something. And there's a lot of things to overcome in this world. And when we win a little victory, we need to thank God for that. Thank God in the good, just as in the bad, just as we do in the good.
And especially in the bad, if the bad happens, we can't say it's because of God. We have to say it's because of our sin.
Right. Because the bad comes is because we made a bad choice. But we can still overcome it and give God the praise, give God the glory. Just as God won glory with the destruction of the Egyptians. And not only that, but a people converted because they heard and they seen the truth of what Moses was saying, what happened with Moses, and became part of Israel later, became good friends with Israel, and later on became part of Israel. And the mixed multitude became part of Israel because they believed. They seen what was going on, and they believed Moses. And just as we have read before that in the future, we're going to have that same thing happen again, that the Gentiles, the foreigners living in the tribes in which they are dwelling in, are no longer to be called foreigners, but be called Sabra, homeborn, born in the land, the children they bear in the land, and they are to be given an inheritance amongst the tribe in which they live. no longer to be separate in that essence, but part of the tribe. They're still Gentiles, still foreigners, but they're part of the kingdom. And that's what Paul was trying to tell us too, is that a Gentile does not have to convert to become Jewish in order to be saved, right? They need to stay where they're at, but repent from the idolatry and stuff like that, and then learn the things we need to walk in as we go from in the synagogue and the Torah and Torah teachers and stuff like that, which way we need to walk, how we walk, and the teachings of Yeshua, right? That's how we do it. And so that when Yeshua comes back, he's not only going to take all of Israel from the four corners of the world, but those Gentiles, as this is Zechariah 8 and other places, the Gentiles, he will take those people and bring them with to the land of Israel. And they'll be part of it. They'll still be Gentiles, and they're still going to be Jews. But in essence, in God seeing us, there is no Jew or Gentile, male or female, slave or free, because he sees us all as we are. He's calling us all as we are. Now the thing is, even though he calls us, whether we're Jewish or Gentile, whatever, the thing is, he loves us too much to leave us in the state we are. That's why Yeshua came. So that when the time comes, when Yeshua comes, the dead are going to rise, the resurrected bodies, right? To bodies that have no longer the corruption. And those of us who are alive and remain will be changed in the twinkling of an eye into the same thing, right? That's what we have to look forward to. Yeshua is coming back. The days are growing shorter. We're seeing the things happening. We don't know how long we have left on this planet, how long this planet's going to survive, before Yeshua comes. But we need to not worry about it. We just need to get ourselves right with God and following God's commandments, his teachings, what Yeshua has taught us, and being a witness for everybody else, a light, because the darkness we see it's getting dark. I'm not talking about the literal light and dark. I'm talking about the spiritual darkness. We're seeing it enveloping all over the world. And we need to be that light that Yeshua said to put in the window so people can see it, And his light will draw all men, right? And that's what we need to be. We are a reflection of that light. But if we're not reflecting him, then we have no light. And that's the thing too. It's sad to see. Some people are blind to that. They don't realize that they're not a light, but they think they are. But that's why we have to walk the right walk. We have to live the right way, separate. Just as God called Israel holy, means separated. We too are, as part of the nation of Israel or the people of Israel, in that same thing, the kingdom, which is here on earth, which will be on earth. We have a special calling. We are a light to the world. And we take hold of Israel because that's who we're a part of. God didn't send Yeshua to create a new religion or a new people. He worked with what he already created, and his promises to Israel still stand today. Israel is God's apple of his eye, his people that he has called, and it is up to the Gentiles to see Yeshua's message and understand what Paul was saying and join Israel, as they are. Yeah.
God is an artist. Whenever he sees us full of mistakes, I guess. I'm not gonna anyway. He sees us full of, bad. And he's like, I can work with that.
Yeah. I see the deficiencies in he can make it right? That's why we're like clay. He sees our happy accidents. Nothing is an accident.
God Ross.
God Ross.
God Ross.
Okay. All right. So anyways, we'll go this week, think about it. Study more. Understand God's word. How are we to walk? And with the 10 utterances, where do they fit into our life? They're not just a moral law. They're part of the 613 commandments. So where do we lack? That's what Yeshua said too. He was asked about that. What's the greatest commandment? Well, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, or strength, and that you are to love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, the greatest commandment is the first one. Then the second one is to love your neighbor as yourself. And in those two commandments, all the commandments are fulfilled if we do them. Part of loving God is following his instructions, right? Yeah.
Point out with that point too, that the first tablet is all about our relationship with God.
Yeah, our relationship with God and our relationship with everybody else, okay? How we stack up, you might say, how we're to treat everybody, okay? But also, here's the thing too, is that when God gave the 10 Commandments on the, we'll read about later, the tablets, he gave 2 tablets, not that they were written separate like this, but it says they were written on the front and the back. One for Israel and one for God. Just a legal document. Copies, right? So we don't forget. All right, we'll go ahead and say the priestly blessing, page 586. Our God and God of our fathers, bless us with a threefold blessing in the Torah written by the hand of Moses, your servant, and pronounced by Aharon and his sons, the priests, your holy people, as it is said. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May it be your will. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May it be your will. May the Lord turn his face toward you and grant you peace. May it be your will. Yevarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha. Shalom. Go in peace. Have an awesome week. A great rest of the Shabbat. Tuesday night is our Torah Club, which is put out by First Church of Zion, torahclub.org. We meet on mostly online on Tuesday night at 7. And then Wednesday night we have our study, our Wednesday night study. So that starts at 7 also. And their Shabbat services at 10 a.m. every Shabbat. So thank you all for coming. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos.